Okay. Before we go to one of the final questions, I would like to play like a game. So my suggestion is, I'm throwing out a terroir or a variety, and you're just saying briefly, Mark, briefly, your your idea, your perspective. Let's start. Crete.
Oh, Crete. You know, I was supposed to be flying to Crete on Friday.
Don't tell me about that.
Yeah,
Forget
you know, you helped me organise it. I mean, God, yeah, I was. You know,
you will do it very.
I know.
In the next few months.
As soon as restrictions are lifted,
yes.
I'll be off to Crete. You know, I think Crete is super exciting for a number of reasons. One, it has the most exciting winemaker in Greece at the moment, Yannis Ekonomou, who is relatively unknown even to Greeks, but certainly in the wider context. Lots of guys in New York and London are really waking up to the quality of Yannis's wines. But he is as authentic as it gets, and he's also idiosyncratic, and he's also his own man, and you know, difficult, I'm sure, to deal with if you're importing his wines, and if you're, you know, but Greece needs more winemakers like Yannis Ekonomou. And I really hope that the next generation of winemakers in Greece, that there will be more eccentric individuals that will seek to do what he has done in Sitia with their own terroirs, you know, wherever they might be. So they have an amazing winemaker in an artisanal sense. I think they also have two really, really exceptional winemakers in a slightly larger scale, Liverakis and Doulafakis, who make great wines and make really, really true varietal wines, which tell the story of Crete, tell the story of the varieties themselves, and are made in enough volume, because this is important. You know, I'm not all about just these tiny, tiny wineries. You know, if we're going to tell the story of Greek wine, we need to be able to see it sold around the world. Yeah. And, you know, those two wineries have enough volume, not massive volume, but enough volume to tell the story outside of a very sort of limited, enthusiastic kind of circle. So that's great. So they have great artisanal winemaker. They have some really, really good, and there are other examples, Manoussakis and other people like that, you know, who I'm forgetting. But you know, there are other guys doing really well. It has its own palette of indigenous varieties, that some of which, Vidiano in particular, I think is really, really exciting. But you know, Thrapsotheri, Liatico, and Daphne, yeah, which is incredibly unique. And you know, I think when I think back to some of the wonderful Greek wine experiences I've had, you know, one of them, which was a couple of years ago, my wife and I, we holiday in Greece every year, obviously, as you know, and we had a brilliant meal, actually a few brilliant meals, at a place called Ohamos in Milos, which is just this gorgeous restaurant where most of what they sell comes out of their own garden. And we had a bottle of Liverakis Daphne, you know, okay, not in Crete, in Milos, but still, you know, looking out over the garden, having just a wonderful time, a wonderful Greek experience. And that variety and that expression of it are so quintessentially Greek, and different and interesting, and you know, there's such a story to tell there. That's just one bottle of one variety of one style of wine, which, you know, for me gives a really bold and beautiful expression of what Greek wine is about in that particular instance. You know, there are many other examples besides. So both red and white, you know, Crete is full of great Greek varieties, and has a small number of really interesting wineries, but that number is growing in terms of what these guys are doing. And again, as we said before, you know, the cooperatives are still quite powerful there, so there's so much potential for those grapes to come out of the cooperative system into the hands of vignerons, and who can do more and more interesting things with it. You know, and I know of some young people in Crete who are very enthusiastic, very talented, and very ambitious, and so I have high hopes for the next chapter in the Greek wine story, in the Cretan wine story. Sorry.
Yeah, I quite agree. And now let's move a little bit to the north and go and talk a little bit about Ayurvedico in EMEA and beyond.
Yeah, so this is a great variety that I've got a funny relationship with, and I think that, you know, when I first started to get to sort of interact with Ayurvedico, It was through wines which are often referred to as super Nemea wines, and that kind of modernist, international, sort of ripe, oak-aged, obviously oak-aged kind of a style. And I'm not going to name. When I name names, I'm only going to try and do it in a positive light. So I won't talk about wines which which are like that. But the fact is that those wines were there, still are there. And I think that Ioritico, I don't think it benefited, and I don't think Nemea as a PDO benefited from that era of very international styled wines. Now, of course, there are wineries like Parparusis, for example, who were, who were doing what they do now a long time ago, and they're wines that I've always had a real soft spot for. There are other wineries, people like Mitravelas, who I've got a lot of respect for the the relatively gentle hand that they put certainly to their unoaked Nemea, and I've enjoyed those wines. But we discussed Panayotis at Tetramathos earlier on, and
before, yes,
I think that that style of that gentle approach to Ioritico, it opens up a whole new chapter or a whole new perspective on the grape, and I'm really excited about Nemea has incredible terroir. Let's not get away from that. And I think that there's enormous
and it's a
potential.
great opportunity. Yes, yeah. We said the same thing. Great opportunity for Nemea, and there is a shift to more elegant, more refined expressions of Ioritico.
Yeah, God, we're going to be cut off again soon, I'm sure. Don't ask me about now, so we'll be here until tomorrow.
I'm going to ask, of course.
So I think. I think Nemea is very exciting, but I think I'm not going to be as arrogant to say that I believe there should be a cultural change in Nemea, because listen, there are guys there who have done incredible work for Greek wine in an international context, and for Nemea in a local context. People like George Skouras, people like Yanis Paraskevopoulos, who have taken the conversation. There are many other examples.
Semeli Palivosias, a lot of people, absolutely.
And kudos to those guys for, in that generation of Greek wine, for bringing Greek wine into the 21st century, and all the rest of it. But now I think the generation that we have now, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they're all young, but the winemakers that are at the sharp end of the conversation today, whether they be in Nemea or elsewhere, I think that they are bringing a different perspective, and that's great to the conversation. And in Nemea, I think that means a more restrained approach, and we will see what happens working with those terroirs you talked about that are higher altitude, and working in the winery in a way which is maybe a little bit more hands-off, or maybe if not necessarily hands-off, certainly sort of restrained with older oak and with a different type of regime to an approach to the way that they make their wines. And listen, those wines won't be the same as the ones that have gone before. They won't be for everyone, just like the ones that went before won't be for everyone. But I think that a bit more diversity in the Nemean conversation, in the Ioritico conversation, will be fantastic. But we need a generation, or at least a few examples of people who are taking a much more softly approach.
Few words about the dry styles of Mavrodaphne.
Yeah, this is a really exceptional avenue, I think, for the red wine conversation in Greece. Actually, and I don't know how you feel about this, but I'm slightly more. I have a bit more affection for the examples from Kefalonia than the mainland necessarily. But that said, Ruvalis make a wonderful dry Mavrodaphne in the northern Peloponnese, and there are other really interesting examples too.
And Parparousis, of course,
yeah,
makes
absolutely.
The Taos. I think there are very few examples. There are 10, 20 examples of dry Mavrodaphne, and yet we cannot draw safe conclusions. My idea is that for the moment, Kefalonia is on the lead. But they're equally, the two examples that you mentioned are really fantastic from the Peloponnese, and we can see more coming up.
I think you're absolutely right what you say, and that is part of what makes it interesting. Right now, we're very early in the conversation.
Yes.
Because Mavrodaphne obviously is one of the most important, historically, one of the most important Greek grape varieties in terms of the history of what Achaia Claus and, you know, people have done with the sweet versions of the wines, and those historic appellations in the Peloponnese and in the Ionian that have used Mavrodaphne to make sweet red wines. But now there's a new chapter opening up, which is this conversation about, well, you know, just like in Portugal, you know, Touriga Nacional is not just about sweet wine. You know, it has enormous potential for fantastic, complex, authentic, interesting dry wines. And Mavrodaphne is the Greek equivalent in a sense. I know that's a really basic way to describe it, and I've just spent 10 minutes saying how you shouldn't be talking about Greek wine in the context of others. But, you know, the fact is there are parallels there, and I think that
we can use them, to draw conclusions, and
we shouldn't be making Mavrodaphne in the way that people are making Touriga Nacional, but there are parallels,
Okay, Xinomavro, you expected that?
Yeah, I mean,
and a little bit about unexplored terroirs like Siatista.
Yeah, well, this is it, and well, I'll come to Siatista in a second, but I mean, as a grape variety, Xinomavro it's world class, simple as that. And you know, when I first got into Greek wine, it was thanks to this stuff. It was thanks to a Certico from Santorini, and you know, when I really got into the wines, and I was not just, you know, the stuff that you would typically come into contact with, but, you know, maybe back vintages of Sigalas barrel fermented, or, you know, doing a mini vertical of Milos from or Lauros from Hatzidakis. You know, you think, oh fuck, this is a really serious grape variety. And, you know, a Certico, I knew it. I knew that it was a noble grape variety with enormous potential, a world-class profile, and a world-class terroir in Santorini. And it was just a question of me doing my own discovery as much as I can, and then sharing that with my circle and hoping that other people were doing the same. And the conversation would go from there, and it has done. And that's not thanks to me. That's thanks far more to you than it is to me. But, you know, to this community of communicators who really believe in it. And so, I think for a lot of people who come to Greek wine from the outside, a Certico is the gateway drug, and then we like, okay, Greece has something really serious to offer. And then, you know, you look at Xinomavro, which is kind of the red equivalent in terms of quality, I think, to a Certico. And again, there's a lot of wine which is out there and is tough and tannic and hard and acidic and, you know, not particularly friendly. And if that was the only wines that you ever interacted with, then you would say, you know, it's not that interesting. But once you actually really start to look at what is out there in terms of the high quality examples, I mean, it's mind-boggling, the potential of this grape. And, you know, Apostolos Thimiopoulos deservedly gets a lot of credit for, you know, back in the early 2000s, Earth and Sky, or is it Uranos it's called in the United States?
Uranos.
Yeah. So we call it Earth and Sky in the UK.
Yes.
And, you know, that wine was
changed the perception.
It was a game changer, yeah. It was about saying, you know, this is a slightly different way to interpret this grape variety, and, you know, and these are the things that can come from, you know, from doing it this way. But you know, Apostolos is a great winemaker. I love his wines, but there are lots of other fantastic examples there too. And you know, it goes from you know, the guys at Chiajani, who have always made very sort of terroir specific wines with what they've done with their fruit. But for me, the really super exciting stuff is things like Dalamara, Caridas, you know, wines that come from a much to be fair, you know, a lot of the Chiajani example I used there from you know, from a specific sort of subzone. But, you know, these subzone wines that really sort of zoom in to the high altitude, or to the ripeness of the valley floor, or, you know, there's some incredible wines there. And so in Nausa alone, I think Xinomavro has proven itself to be world class. love Varieties, and love some of the old vintages from Chateau Pegasus that they did before. You know, for me, Costis Dallamares is the most exciting winemaker in the appellation. Personally, I think his Vieux is the best red wine in Greece. That's my perspective. That's my take on it. But he's one of a group of winemakers. We've mentioned some of the other names who are making really fantastic wines there. And Zina Mavro is proving itself to be two things, and these are really important, distinct from each other. One, it's proving itself to be a world-class grape. We knew it could age well because all of the old wines, you know, we had to wait for 30 years before we could drink them. But now what we've seen with the sort of the modern interpretation of Zina Mavro is that not only does it age well, but you can make it so that it is friendly and is
more approachable,
accessible and approachable and delicious and lovely from the start. Without sacrificing that potential to age. So that's the first thing, which, you know, for me is really, really important. But the also,
second?
Well, it's that it's so authentically Greek. I mean, when I open a bottle of really good Zina Mavro, it is not just about the primary sort of plum and berry fruit that you hope to capture in, you know, in most red wines. It's also about that dried oregano and that black olive and the sun-dried tomato and there are times when
Mediterranean aromas.
You open a bottle of great Zina Mavro for somebody and you put it in the glass and it transports you in a way that the great wines of the world do. A Certico with its salinity and its sort of the sea air that is kind of, you know,
takes you straight to Santorini.
This section of the glass that's the sea air. You know what I mean? You feel like you stood on the caldera and you're breathing in the
sea breeze, the minerality, everything.
Incredible. And obviously, when we go to France, we could talk. You know, that would be a whole different conversation about the authenticity that those grapes bring, and Italy and Spain and so many other places besides, where you open a bottle of those wines and you know where it's transported you to. It's a visceral experience, and Zina Mavro can do that. And for me, that is one of the hallmarks of a world-class grape.
Transporter.
Yeah.
The transporter grape. What about other areas? PDOs, Gumenisa,
Exactly.
Amindeos,
So this should be the third. This should be the third point there that out of those that I made. It's actually a brilliant, a very transparent window onto a terroir, and that can be the different terroirs within Nausa. You know, whether it's Polonera at one end or whether it's Fitia up at the, you know, far further up the slope and at a different end of the valley. You know, it does it in Nausa, and that's why it will be really exciting to see how Nausa develops in terms of further, you know, conversation about its subzones. But then you just go to the other side of the mountains and up onto the plateau into Amindion, and you've got a very different expression and a very different communication that Zina Mavro will give you. You know, of the Amindion terroir. You mentioned Gumenisa, warmer, different spot. You know, it has a different feel. The Zina Mavro there is equally interesting, but just through a different lens, from a different perspective. And then, you know, the fact is that we've already talked about Rapsani, so I won't go into too much more detail about that place. But what I find really interesting is that we have this clonal difference of Zina Mavro in these different places. I mean, of course, it's a variety that has been in northern Greece for thousands of years, certainly hundreds of years. And no, it must be thousands of years, many thousands of years. And so it has developed in different ways in different places. And so to bring in Satia, which you mentioned a second ago.
Siadsta, right?
Sorry, thank you.
It's okay.
No, I need it. I'm speaking a foreign language, so I still need the correction. To bring in Siatista, which I was, you know, you put me onto Siatista a few years ago, and then I had the opportunity. God, when was it? A couple of years ago now.
2 years ago, I think.
To go see Dimitri Diamantis in Siatista, and that place, wow. I mean, you know,
and all the history, architecture, everything.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And the terroir, you know, the limes, you need to put sunglasses on, even in the winter, just to look at the limestone terroir there. It's incredible. You know, and the thing about these sort of forgotten places, or these, and I say forgotten because, like you say, it has a great history of being a very famous wine region. But it's sort of fallen out of favor in the sense that, you know, there are very few people now putting Siatista wine out, and there are very few people, even in Greece, who talk about it as being an interesting and exceptional place.
Correct.
But
yes.
you know, we're at like 800-900 meters high, incredible limestone terroir,
Old vines,
100-plus-year-old vineyards, own rooted, you know, pre-phylloxera vines. Well, not you know what I mean, like sort of non-phylloxera infected vines. Just a stunning place.
Yeah.
And then, to make it even more interesting, you have this local adaptation of Xinomavro, which it needs to be able to ripen on a different cycle to what it would do in Goumenissa or you know, Nausa.
Yeah.
And so it has this different tannic profile. It has this different sort of, it's still demonstrably Xinomavro, but it has this different sort of feel in the mouth, this different sort of sensation. And that, for me, again, is about why Xinomavro is a world-class grape variety. It has this ability to transmit the place, whether it be Siatista, Nausa, Rapsani, Goumenissa, you know, Felvendo, whatever. You know, there's all of the places that you can find it, but you find it in its own local, authentic way.
So obviously, I will keep Assyrtiko and Santorini perhaps for a new live Instagram. But before we conclude, Mark, is there a new wave of Greek wine? This is the final question. I tried to integrate all the questions in these 7 key questions, because a lot of people have sent stuff. So last one, is there a new wave of Greek wines? How do you feel?
I wouldn't call it a wave right now. I think there is, it's more than a trickle, less than a wave. But I think that what I will say is that there is definitely a wave of energy. You know, there is really like a new wave of energy and ideas, and people really, you know, sort of wanting to bring a new perspective or being part of that new conversation about Greek wine. And that's fantastic. And that is, you know, that goes from the brilliant wine bars in Athens, places like Innocent and Heteroclito and, you know, and Paleo and lots of other places. And that sort of, that growing sommelier community in Athens that is really proud of the artisanal wineries that are happening. You're a massive part of it in terms of spreading that conversation. 50 Great Greek Wines is going to be a really big part of that. And then, you know, the winemakers themselves, of course, you know, you don't have to look too far from where we've just been discussing, you know, Goumenissa, you know, Chloe Hatzivariti, who has brought amazing new energy to a brilliant family winery that have been there doing their thing for a long time, doing great wines. But Chloe's brought a whole new perspective and a whole new energy to the conversation there. And, you know, not far down the road from there is Jason Ligas again. His dad, Thomas, an amazing winemaker, done some brilliant stuff at Domaine Ligas. But Jason has got a different perspective. Well, to be fair, his dad is very much on board with it. But you know what I mean? He's got a different energy, and he's got a new sort of context to bring to it. And those guys are like 10 minutes drive from each other. That's just 2 examples. There are lots of other things happening in different places. We talked about Tinos before. There's a lot of good energy there. There's lots of great projects happening. But when I say I'm not sure it's a wave yet, what I mean is
a very small wave.
Yeah. So you look at South Africa and what has happened there. And, you know, Eben Sadi was a really important figure. And out of Eben's kind of influence, there really was a wave of new winemakers. And the second wave, and you've seen it in Beaujolais as well, Lapierre, Thévenet, Foillard, Breton, Chaminade, the famous Gang of Five, you know, they created this new energy and this new perspective on Beaujolais. And then they were kind of the first sort of wave. And then a second
Everyone
wave,
came aboard.
It all sort of came. And now there's even a third wave of people who are coming after that. And, you know, and so Beaujolais got massive momentum and real sort of excitement there that, you know, young people are just, and not just young people, but people who are young of spirit and young of heart are getting involved, making the wine, writing about the wine, pouring the wine in their bars and restaurants, drinking the wine as drinkers and collectors. So there's a real sort of momentum. And I think that Greece, we are definitely moving in the right direction, but I feel like we need a bit more of a critical mass of these new projects and this new energy to really create a wave out of it. I think, you know, another guy who's really important and has really impressed me is Nikos Karatsas, because, you know, what he does with his Enops project, I think is something which should be seen as an example for a lot of people. You know, he's working in different places, but he's making wines that are really authentic to the variety and the place that they come from. Yeah. But what he's doing by virtue of his project is highlighting the potential that there is for young people who are coming out of university or who have come out of stages, or they've been working as assistant winemaker at this place for 5 years, and now it's a chance for them to buy some fruit from an old vineyard and to do something exciting and interesting, whether it's in Crete or Attica or Peloponnese or Drama or Nausa or wherever it is. I mean, wherever we go on the Greek wine map, there is opportunity and there is potential. So we have the energy, we have the raw materials, and I think that what we need next to really make it a wave is we need more people to sort of to take a risk and to say, fuck it, I'm going to do it.
Mark, so I think we had a wonderful discussion, and thank you for exchanging in a very polite, fruitful, sincere, and authentic way, genuine, like you are. For people that are watching the Greek Wine Talks episodes, I want to say thank you for all your questions. I will see you next week with a discussion in Greek about the new generation of Greek wine with Argyris Gerovasiliou, Dimitris Skouras, and Chloe Hadjivariti that Mark mentioned. So see you next week. Mark, mate, thank you so much.
No problem. Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
A pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye.